For NewYorkUpstate.com and Syracuse.com, I'm Matt Parrino with Ryan Talbot, and we are here to talk some Buffalo Bills. 4-7. Excitement in Buffalo, not only for the hockey team, but the football team and the rookie quarterback, Josh Allen, and that's where I want to start. Ryan, first of all, I mean, we talked a lot last week about, Josh Allen in the last 6 games and what we wanted to see out of him as this season progressed here. Well, what we saw on Sunday was, a lot of exciting play, not only with his legs, but also with his arm, the 75-yard touchdown pass to Robert Foster. What was your impressions of Josh Allen's performance in his return?
Yeah, I think this was clearly his best performance yet in the NFL. And it makes me believe that maybe he really did learn from his time on the sidelines with Brian Daboll kind of quizzing him on the formations, on the plays, having Derek Anderson, having Matt Barkley there as support. So he checked a lot of boxes for me on Sunday. Like you said, he had that 75-yard touchdown pass to Robert Foster. He did a lot of really good things on that play alone, stepping up into the pocket, being patient with the read, because obviously, a lot of these passes that Josh Allen has are off of play action, and sometimes those plays can be longer to develop, and you need to have that patience. There was a few times where I said, okay, maybe he took off a little bit too early, but it was really hard to criticize his game. And when the game was over, actually it was in the fourth quarter, I said, anyone that criticizes Josh Allen's stat line clearly didn't watch the game, because there were throws that he made on third downs that should have gone for first downs, but there were penalties that called them back. There were drops by his wide receivers. He was extremely accurate, minus 2 to 3 throws on Sunday against the Jaguars. So I think Bills fans should be very optimistic about what we're going to see out of Josh Allen here towards the end of the season.
Mm-hmm. It's something that I really wanted to talk about with you, because diving into the national conversation around this game is almost like the anti-Kansas City Chiefs Los Angeles Rams game from Monday night last week. A very defensive-oriented game, 2 quarterbacks that aren't really known for a lot of yards passing or a lot of completions, and you saw that. And if you actually look at just Josh Allen's stat line, 42% completion rate is exactly what critics of Josh Allen were talking about when he came into the league. But you watch this game, and for both of us who watch this more closely than most, you see the little things that he's doing and the progress that he's made from early on in the season against the defense that, let's be honest, the Jacksonville Jaguars defense is still one of the top units in the league, even if they're not playing up to the level that they were playing at a Super Bowl level last season. So I think if you're right, if you're a Bills fan, you have to be happy with what you've seen. One thing I did see, though, I saw a comment that called Josh Allen the rich man's Blake Bortles. And I don't have it off the top of my head who said it. It may have been, I don't even want to say it because I don't know who said it. But the rich man's Blake Bortles, I got to thinking about it a little bit. And I think that couldn't be further from the case. Not only has Blake Bortles been in the league for, 5-6 seasons now, he's a completely different kind of quarterback. And you actually saw in the aerial part of the game, that 75-yard touchdown pass to Robert Foster was spectacular. I don't see Blake Bortles going out and doing that too much of the time over in Jacksonville. So what are your impressions of that statement?
Maybe if they're saying in the terms of, Bortles can hurt you with his feet, because he did that against the Bills last year in the playoffs. I can see some parallels there, but I don't think it's a fair comparison to Josh Allen, especially this early on in his career. Bortles is obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but he's probably played his last snap as a starter with Jacksonville. The fact that they benched him today for Cody Kessler, I know they're on the hook for some money with him, but they're going to have to look for another quarterback, whether it's in free agency, the trade market, or the draft this year. So I don't think that's a great comparison. I see some loose parallels there. Like I said, Bortles can use his feet. He can run a little bit. You didn't see that much on Sunday against the Bills, but he did hurt them last year in the playoffs with his feet a little bit. So there's some parallels there, but not enough to say that I really like that comparison.
I'm going to stick with this. I think the most parallels to another quarterback's game are with Cam Newton. If you look at Cam Newton's career, 3 Pro Bowls, only 3 seasons where he threw above over 60% passing for the season. I think there's a lot of similarities to the game. To their games. Cam Newton is a very physical quarterback. He seeks out that contact, and you saw that in yesterday's game. The areas of Josh Allen's game that you alluded to it earlier that have to improve are that short, very short passing game, the easy ones. He's got to connect on that. And I think that as he develops that part of his game, and Brian Daboll today at the press conference spoke about it, it's stuff that, we're continuing to work on him. And you could see the frustration on Josh Allen's face when he does make those errors. But as that progresses and you start to look into 2019, and beyond, you talk about a LaShawn McCoy, a weapon that this team has, and he becomes even more of a weapon if you could start implementing him in the passing game, which you look at the stats yesterday and he only had 1 catch.
Yeah, absolutely. There are certain guys that you want to see get more involved, but at the same time, you're seeing these speed options really work out for the Bills. Robert Foster, again, had a huge game for Buffalo. I think he would have gone over 100 yards if he didn't get kind of he was kind of knocked there on his second catch. He had to be seen by the trainers. But he was well on his way to 100 yards after that 75-yard catch and the 19-yard reception. Isaiah McKenzie, he had that 1 third-down conversion that was called back on a penalty. He had another catch in the game. He had the touchdown run. So I do like some of these speed options and what they're doing and how they're helping Josh Allen today. But you're right. You get an elusive running back like LaShawn McCoy involved in the passing game too. And that's just going to help Josh Allen with not only his stat line, but also with his confidence in that short to intermediate pass game on some of those throws that he should be making on a regular basis.
A lot of flack, given to the Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane duo for what they didn't do last offseason and putting pieces around Josh Allen. But all of a sudden, as this season progresses, you start to see some fruits of their labor paying off. I mean, Wyatt Tellers, he started his second game. Some good things, some bad things. I have to go back and watch the full game once again. But Robert Foster, Isaiah McKenzie, guys that, this group believed in, especially Robert Foster. We spoke about it at the beginning at the end of training camp. Robert Foster making this team was a bit of a shocker, I think, to a lot of people. He didn't have the strongest training camp. His mechanics were a little bit funky. He wasn't using his hands to catch the ball every time. And I think the way that he's come on after getting cut, I think you can only give praise to Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane for those two things, especially for everybody that wanted to knock him for some of the things this past offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that Brian Daboll probably, fought to keep Robert Foster on the 53-man roster too in the beginning of the year because he knew him from Alabama. And although Foster didn't put up any major stats or any great eye-popping stats at Alabama, he probably knew about Foster's work ethic and what he could do if he developed it with the Bills early on in the season. And obviously it didn't happen early in the year. They released him from the 53-man roster, brought him back to the practice squad. But since he's been back up, he's 2 games, he's made key plays in both games that have helped them win. So he's been a revelation. You already mentioned Isaiah McKenzie. So now I want to see some of these other younger guys get mixed in. Ray McLeod was inactive. I think a lot of that has to do with Isaiah McKenzie being able to do a lot of the same things that he can do. But as you're seeing Kelvin Benjamin's snaps go down by more and more snaps on a game-to-game basis, maybe at some point you just swap him out with a Ray McLeod, and it takes away a big target, takes away one of your more natural outside wide receivers. But I do want to see them keep working these younger guys in, seeing what they can do. I want Josh Allen, to work on his chemistry with Zay Jones. Zay Jones was coming off of the best game of his career with Matt Barkley, throwing passes to him. He was sitting in the right spots against the defense. He was getting open. And then yesterday he only had 1 target despite being on the field for the majority of the snaps. So I want to see that duo kind of the chemistry there grow over these last few games of the season. But overall, there's a lot of positives. And like you said, Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott deserve some praise for some of these players that they've either brought along from the beginning of the season, like Foster, or guys they have found out on the waiver wire like McKenzie.
Mm-hmm. You bring up Kelvin Benjamin, and I want to talk a little bit about the defense before we get out of here, but he's a very interesting case study because I feel like, he's been pretty much written off by, the Bills fan base at this point. I think most people would be very pleased if he was out of town come this offseason, but I think he's an interesting case because, you look at some of the plays this season from him, and when he flashes the playmaking ability. In the preseason with Nathan Peterman on that first drive, that touchdown catch. Before Josh Allen got injured, those two big completions, one was called back, but then one on the actual injury. I think he could be. I'm in the minority here, but I do think that Kelvin Benjamin isn't a useless wide receiver. I think that he does have talent. I think that he did it at times. I talked to Zay Jones last week when some of this social media backlash came up in the locker room with Kelvin Benjamin, and Zay said, listen, he's still Kelvin Benjamin. He hasn't shown that so far this season, but do you think at this point they should move on and look to other receivers, or do you think he could potentially be another option or another weapon for Josh Allen if he figures it out again?
I never want to say never, but I think that Benjamin kind of even hinted or alluded, and I know he did kind of backtrack and say, or if I'm back here in Buffalo next year. But I think he's even seen the writing on the wall, so to speak, and he's going to go out there and he's going to see, who's interested in him in free agency, what kind of money is out there. I think the Bills will check in on him, but I don't think that he's going to be a top priority when the season ends. I wouldn't be shocked if the Bills say, let us know what you get offered, and we'll let you know if we have a similar offer or we can beat that offer. But I just don't see him being that guy that they're going to want to spend some of that cap space on. Maybe if they miss out on one of their top two targets in free agency at wide receiver, maybe then they circle back to Benjamin. There's a lot of what ifs still here, but I just don't see him being a priority for the Bills this offseason.
And especially, too, just today, N'Keal Harry from Arizona State announced that he is going to be coming out in the draft. And that's a guy that if the Bills end up picking in that middle to, middle-ish first-round range, that could definitely be an option for them. And then, whoever they add at wide receiver in the draft, you figure it'll be at least one, maybe two potential impact players for next season. That would probably mean that Kelvin Benjamin's days are numbered in Buffalo. Finally, before we get out of here, the defense, a very interesting day against the Jaguars, a team that is known to have a very little in the passing game, more known for their run. They were really able to establish that run against the Bills, and Leonard Fournette specifically more than doubled his season average for most of the game before he was ejected, obviously in the third quarter when the melee, the brawl in Buffalo went down. But, two things. Were you surprised that the Jaguars were able to run so well on the Bills? And B, how impressed were you with the adjustments that they made to kind of temper that in the second half?
I was partially surprised. I know Leonard Fournette is a very talented running back. I know that, he has the power to break through arm tackles. But at the same time, Blake Bortles was entering this game coming off of a Pittsburgh outing where he only threw the ball 18 times. It was pretty apparent that Jacksonville's game plan was going to be to lean on the run game and to, run the ball right down Buffalo's throat until Buffalo could force the stop. And they really couldn't stop Fournette in the first half. And you saw them come back from that 14-0 deficit to tie the game. And part of me wonders what would have happened if Fournette had not been kicked out of the game for throwing punches at Shaq Lawson. What would they have converted at the goal line with him in the game? There's a very good chance they would have done that because Carlos Hyde is not the same type of back. Would they have been forced to throw as much later in the game with Blake Bortles? Because it took that late interception by Jordan Poyer to really put the Bills up by 2 scores. So Jacksonville could have still leaned down the run late in the game. So Fournette getting ejected, I think, was the turning point of the game for Buffalo's defense. The run defense all of a sudden was much improved at that point. Maybe some of that was halftime adjustments. It's really hard to say with Fournette not in there, not running the ball, especially late in the game. So I was a little disappointed early on because I think Buffalo knew that was going to be the game plan. They just could not stop Fournette. But to their credit, they did, really improve in that area in the second half against Carlos Hyde. They really stopped Blake Bortles from taking off with his feet, and obviously they came up with 2 big interceptions during the game. So the defense really did turn things around in the second half.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you're the Bills, if you're Sean McDermott, you look at both sides of the ball, this defensive unit that has had to carry the load for much of this season, it probably was a nice change of pace in this game, the New York Jets game, for this defensive unit, maybe not playing its best, especially in the Jacksonville game, to look over on the other side of the ball and see the offense making plays, scoring some points. And even Leslie Frazier today told me when I asked him, he said, yeah, I mean, it's a shot in the arm. It provides energy when you can see your offense. This league now is about scoring points, and when you can see your offense scoring points, good things happen. But I think, I wanted to, take it to that specific situation in the third quarter. The brawl happens, and then the ensuing few plays that went down, and the way that not only the Bills defense was able to rally, but the way that the fans rallied. I mean, that stadium was not full by any means, but you could feel, I mean, it felt like sold out New Era Field, that feeling that you got from the very first week. And that's impressive stuff. I mean, these guys talked about it after the game. Several players talked about what it was like to feel that energy from the fans. And I think when this defense is playing at that level, when they're executing, I mean, if this offense comes around next year, that can mean very scary things for this division. And maybe they finally take a run at Tom Brady and the New England Patriots.
Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it with the whole Brady part. But I do think that they can contend for a wild card spot, and I mean kind of run away with one of those spots if they can fix the offense. If they kind of follow that Mitch Trubisky plan like Chicago did in his second year, where they really went out there and they were aggressive in adding wide receivers in free agency and adding wide receivers in the draft and adding just talent around him, bringing in a guy like Trey Burton, having a good 1-2 punch at running back. They did a lot to help Trubisky, and I think that should be Buffalo's game plan this offseason. And if they can do that, you're right. It'll help the defense a lot, too. The defense won't have to be perfect. And there's been a lot of times this year where it feels like they've had to be perfect to keep the Bills in the games. You look at the Titans game that they ended up winning. You look at the Texans game, a game that they could have won, where the defense was really great throughout. So if the offense can get on track, and I'm not saying they have to be the Rams or the Chiefs or anything like that, but if they can be an average scoring offense in this league with that defense, the Bills can really make some noise next year.
100%. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, for all your Bills content. Keep it locked on to nyup.com, syracuse.com. And make sure that you subscribe here on YouTube. Make sure that you follow us at Bills Updates on Twitter. Follow us, Buffalo Bills at nyup.com on Facebook. We'll always have some post-game content on there, video content on there. And for all of your news coverage, keep it locked on nyup.com for all of Mr. Talbot's fine work. Have a great day, guys.